Good morning. It's good to see about 75% of you over here, about 25% over there. It's a nice split. I like it. Just keep it up. Keep it up. No, it's good to be here. It's been an interesting morning for me. Some days I wake up and I'm totally fine with the fact that my oldest is in college. And other days I wake up and I get a message that says, "Hi, Daddy, I love you." And I want to drive up to Malibu and spend the day up there. That's been one of those days for me. So it kind of messes with you as a dad every now and again, right? But together, 75 and 25, we will get through. We will get through this. We're still in the Gospel of John, and we're looking at a passage in John chapter 15, or we will eventually, but it's connected directly to John chapter 12, and it's this idea of what do you got to do to grow something? How many of you have farmed, have been farmers, or read a book in school at some point about what you got to do to grow something? All right, percentages-wise, we're back down to about 2%. This is good. One of our neighbors has a cherry tree, and several months ago it was cherry season, and I will tell you that those cherries were delicious. They were so good, and it makes you want to jump out there and start growing your own plants and start growing your own vegetables. Now, I grew up on a farm in Ohio where we had to do just this. This picture, it's not a picture of me, but we would literally plant things by hand. We had like a little 1/8 of an acre, which is about the size of the house, the lot where you live probably, about 1/8 of an acre, and it was nothing but a garden. And we grew corn and green beans and peppers and cucumbers and all sorts of things that my parents wanted to grow. And it's amazing once all of us kids left how the garden has shrunk and how the garden has moved to right beside the house instead of all the way over in another area. But we had to do things and certain things to make things grow. We had to go in, we had to plant and water, we had to pull up weeds, we had to make sure that we had dug the holes deep enough to plant. It was quite an ordeal. We had to spread manure from time to time over the ground. And by manure, I don't mean, like green fertilizer. No, nothing that you could buy at a store. We'd literally go to our neighbors and get a wagon full of manure and spread manure by hand. Man, we had tools, but you got it on you. All through the garden, and then we had to wait, and then we'd till. There was a lot of work to make things grow. And Jesus talks about what it takes to make something grow. He calls it bearing much fruit. And what do you got to do to produce or bear much fruit? Jesus replied, "The hour has come." Now, we've looked at this before. This hour has come. Jesus is always talking about the time of the cross. He calls it the hour has come. The time of his glorification has come. And it's always upside down every time he says it. Because every time I think about someone being glorified, I think about them being lifted up, but in a positive, good way, a cheerful way, right? But Jesus said, "This time has come for me to be glorified unless the Son of Man is lifted up." But he's not talking about being elevated and honored. He's talking about being killed. And he says, "The hour has come for the Son of Man," he's talking about himself, "to be glorified. Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces much fruit." Now, from that cherry tree that our neighbors have, my mother-in-law has taken some of the seeds of the cherries. And she's had to do, I don't know if she got on YouTube or Google or what she did to figure this out, because it's not a farmer by trade, and I don't actually know how to make seeds into actually reproducible seeds. It's not as simple as I had thought it would be. She's gone through a process of getting these seeds basically to die so that when she plants them in the ground, we can grow our own cherry tree. And lo and behold, in this little cup, it's like a science fair project, but there's only one sample. Things are sprouting and growing. She's like, "Look, I'm growing cherry trees. I'm gonna dedicate myself to this. This is what I'm gonna do for a living. Grow cherry trees." And Jesus tells us if we want to produce Christian fruit, if we want to produce the fruit that a child of God produces, that a son of Abraham produces, that a disciple of Moses produces. If we want to be a true child of God and we want to be glorified and elevated, you're going to have to die. You're going to have to die. If you want to have more of what you have, you're going to have to die first. And it's such an upside down concept that you have to lower yourself to be elevated. He'll speak a little less cryptically here. He'll say, anyone who loves their life, if you love what you have and you want more of what you have, you will lose it. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. If you want to hold on to the life that you have, eventually it will all go away. But if you will give of what you have now, you'll let the seed die now, you will produce much fruit. Now we're going to look at John chapter 15, where Jesus talks about staying connected to the vine. And it's funny, Perry asked me yesterday or the day before, hey, what are you preaching on this Sunday? And I was like, well, I've got a little surprise for you. It's on the same thing I've been preaching on for the last 8 months. He's running out of songs. And I got to push back again. I mentioned this last week. I want to mention it again now. In religion, we've made religion all about a set of concepts and ideas that we say those are correct ideas and concepts, and I believe in those concepts and ideas. But we don't let it travel down and actually change how we live. And if it doesn't change how we live, it doesn't matter if you think they're right concepts and ideas. It simply does not matter. And the passage we're going to read is much like ones we've already read, where they've been misused and abused. When Jesus says, remain in me and I will remain in you, people will say, that means go to church. Nothing wrong with going to church. Glad you're here. But going to church does not a Christian make. And saying, I have all the right beliefs. First of all, you don't. Neither do I. Some of the beliefs I believe are right are actually wrong. And some of the ones I think someone else has, and they're wrong, they might be right. I can put no faith in my perfect doctrine. And when Jesus says, remain in me, he's not talking about a perfect set of beliefs that you mentally and intellectually assent to and say, yes, I believe those things. That is not what he's saying. So let's read it and see if we can figure out what he's saying. I'll give you a hint. He tells us what he's saying. You just have to read the whole thing. I am the true vine. He says this right after what we reread through John 14, or at least part of it last week. When he says, in my Father's house there are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you I go to prepare a place for you. That passage. On the heels of that passage, he says this. He says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. This can mean nothing but to mean that Jesus is saying, I'm going to die. Because if I'm going to grow a vine and I'm going to produce much fruit, first I have to die. The Son of Man will be lifted up, and he will draw all people to himself. He cuts off every branch that bears no fruit, and that's a scary concept. But what does it mean to bear fruit for Jesus? What does that mean to bear fruit? He says, I want to bear it. I don't want to be cut off. Now in Greek, there's a play on words here because the word for cut off and the word for clean and the word for prune, they all sound very similar. It says, Jesus, I am the true vine. My Father comes and he cuts off every branch that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes or he cleans so it will bear even more fruit. Now, for the two of you who raised your hands, you do know this. If you're growing a tomato plant, sometimes you have to trim off parts that aren't really growing because they're absorbing all the energy, but they're not producing anything. These are scary concepts that Jesus talks about, and it makes you, or it should make you, want to ask the question, what do I have to do to bear fruit? How many prayers do I have to pray? How many services do I need to attend? How many correct doctrines do I need to believe in order to produce fruit? Jesus, tell me. I don't want to be cut off. I just want to be cleaned. It reminds me of Peter. When Jesus was washing the feet in chapter 13, and Peter says, don't just wash my feet, wash everything. He says, I don't need to cut you off completely. I just need to clean you. So we can be even more fruitful. What am I supposed to be producing? What fruit am I supposed to be showing in my life? Jesus says, you are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Now you have to imagine the disciples are going, I have no idea what you're talking about. What does any of this mean? What does it mean? They don't know. Sometimes we don't know either. Jesus says, remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. What is he talking about? What does he want to see out of me? As I live my life, as I go to work, as I'm with my family, as I'm with my church family, what does God want to see out of me? It's way easier for me to find examples of what he doesn't want to see out of me, examples that I could give you of myself. What does he want to see out of me? What does it mean to remain in him and he'll remain in me? Jesus says the same things to Pharisees all throughout the Gospel of John when he's doing miracles and he's showing kindness to people and he's healing the blind and he's healing the lame and he's doing it on Sabbath and he's rubbing grains. He's doing all these things that Jesus does. And he'll say, I could do nothing on my own, because Jesus is saying he's attached to the vine. And if he weren't, he would be producing no fruit. And now he says, remain in me so you can produce fruit. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And that is exactly what Jesus said about himself. If I were not from God, if I weren't coming from the one who sent me, I could do nothing. But look at all the things that I'm doing. Look at the fruit I'm producing. He says the same is true for you. If you don't remain in me, you can't do anything. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. Again, not a pleasant picture. If I'm a branch and I'm told to produce fruit, and if I don't, I'll be burned in a fire, I want to know what kind of fruit I'm supposed to produce, because I don't want to burn up in a fire. Amen? You don't want to burn up in a fire. These are scary images, scary garden images from the Savior. These are scary images from Jesus. But what does he want from us? I about clicked, but I want to stay on that point for just a second. What does he want from us? Do you ever wake up in the morning and say, what do you want from me today, God? How do I stay attached? How do I produce fruit? What am I supposed to do? What do you want from me today? If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. It's a wonderful promise. What should I be asking for? What should I be asking for? This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. Jesus is really dragging it out. If they don't know what he's talking about, he's not telling them immediately what it is he wants from them. Because he has been showing them the whole time. He says, you've already been cleaned by my word. If you've been paying attention to my life and my actions and my teachings, you would already know what I want from you. But typical in John, no one ever seems to know what Jesus wants from them. You can think of all the examples I brought up again and again. Nicodemus, woman at the well, the blind man, the Pharisees. No one ever seems to know exactly what Jesus is driving at, even his own disciples. After the woman at the well, they show up because they sent him off to get food. He comes back. They come back and he says, "Oh, I have food you don't know anything about." And like, "Oh, great, someone gave him food." What does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus? As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. Remaining in the vine, according to the Gospel of John, maybe not according to preachers I heard growing up, but according to the Gospel of John, to remain in Jesus is to remain in his love. The way that he has loved us, as Ignacio brought up in the Lord's Supper talk. So we are to love those around us. The way that he serves us, we serve those around us. We are to be a reflection, an image bearer of God. And that takes a whole lot more than saying, well, the building I go to has the right name on it. Therefore, I'm good. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not talking about living perfect lives. We're going to mess up all the time. I do. I mess up all the time. I would tell you when, but then you'd fire me, so I have to keep it wrapped up. But I mess up all the time. But I'm trying. I know what the goal is. I know what I'm supposed to do. What I'm not supposed to do is get so focused on my right beliefs that I forget about my brothers and sisters whom I'm supposed to love. Do you know how many times we don't, but a lot of times we get divided and split, not because of our love for one another, but because we disagree with each other about something. So what? Your salvation and the love that God has for you is not dependent upon that one belief that you have, that you're certain is right. It might be right. It might be wrong. Either way, your salvation, the love of God, doesn't depend on you having it right. Because if it does, then you better have everything right. And you don't. So when Jesus says, remain in me and I'll remain in you, my words remain in you, he's not talking about those things. He's talking about times where we love each other, often despite our differences. Can I use you as an example, Kathy? She has to say yes. I mean, right here, she was like, no. Kathy and I disagree on a lot of things, right? And Kathy will tell me almost every time, probably not every time because it gets old, but almost every time she'll say, I don't think that point of yours was right. But I know she loves me. And I think she knows that I love her. I can't speak for her, but I can speak for me. Because the way we feel about each other and the way we would help each other when we're in need has nothing to do with whether or not we agree on every single topic. It's deeper than that. And when Jesus says, remain in me, he's not talking about some religious activity. He's talking about a way of life where we love each other. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love. Well, what are his commands? You're going to be shocked to hear his commands. It's a long list. Remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Jesus does not expect the church to be a building full of people who all agree on everything. I disagree with myself from 5 years ago. It's not what he wants. What he does want is people who are willing to plant the seed of their life in the ground and let it die for others. What he does want is people who are willing to stop and say, you know what? I know I have this degree, and I know I have this position, and I know I've done this, I know I've done that, but give me a towel and a basin of water, please, because there's some service that needs to be done. And I'm not that important. He wants people who say, there's no job beneath me. Oh, that job is beneath me. No, it's not. There's no job beneath you. The only job beneath you is hate. That's a job we should never take up. Hasn't stopped us. I'm not sure what happened when we thought if we show the world all the things about the world that we hate, they'll come to us. They won't. If it's a job of love, there is no job too low. Well, I don't know if I agree with that. Jesus showed us. He washed feet. He died on a cross. He says, that's the glory of God. That's when God glorifies me in my life, is when I plant my own life in the ground and let it die. That's when God is glorified. And that is when God is glorified in this church and in your family and in your life and wherever you go. So when he says, remain in me, that's what he means. He tells us what he means. Obey my commands. What commands? Love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. Well, what's that? Just go read the verse again. To love each other as he has loved us. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. When someone's in charge, sometimes, and I do this as a parent sometimes, and I still feel justified in it, by the way. When kids, what are we going to do? You don't need to know. I know. You don't know. I do. You don't need to. I do need to, right? Jesus says, that's not how I'm treating you guys. You know everything. I've revealed everything to you. I don't call you slaves. I call you friends. I don't know what it's like to have a slave. I don't know what it's like to have a servant. I don't even know what it's like to have an employee, really. But I do know what it's like to have a friend. And Jesus says, if we're going to be friends of his, if we're going to be sons of God, if we're going to be sons of Abraham, if we're going to be children, descendants of, or disciples of Moses, if we're going to be those people, if we're going to be a disciple of Jesus, then we're going to love each other. Instead of slaves, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. That's also a big statement. Everything? Everything you need to know. You already know. I've been teaching you and showing you ever since he met them. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. If I love my brothers and sisters, what kind of things should I be asking for? And I will tell you, there's really only ever one thing I ask for. Help me to love better. It's the only fruit I'm supposed to produce. It might get expressed in a lot of different ways, but I've only got one fruit to produce, and it's the fruit called love. And so when I pray with my children at night, that's how I end almost every prayer. And God, help us to love the people around us, no matter what. And I'm sure my kids get tired of hearing it, but one day, and probably not even one day, probably yesterday or the day before, they're going to run into someone that they don't want to love. And I hope that that prayer will come true in their life. They'll find a way to love them. They'll find a way to serve them. They'll find a way This is my command. Love each other. Now, you might think, after about 8 months, I forget how long we've been in the Gospel of John or on this particular set or series, because I don't really pay attention to that sort of thing. I feel like it's been a while, though. You might think, I think he's finally exhausted all the passages about loving each other. I guarantee you I have not. But what I am trying to do is show us, and anyone who happens to listen, that we put a whole lot of stock into a misunderstanding of John chapter 15. Jesus is the true vine. The true vine is a church with a particular name on the building, that particular name, and we go on we go. But Jesus tells us it's not about a building at all. Building? Names on buildings? It's about us. It's about you and me. And this one thing that he wants us to live out every single day, just this one thing. And it's a hard thing. That's why there's only one. This one thing will keep us occupied until we're dead. Love each other. What's his command? To love each other. His command is to no instruments. No, that's not his command. His command is to love each other. His command is no women talking. That's not his command. His command is love each other. No, his command, no. Whatever you're saying the command is, it's not. And how do I know? Because John 15 tells us this is the command. Jesus doesn't give him a long laundry list of doctrines. He gives him one thing. He also says in chapter 14, you're going to need something to help you a lot. It's called the Holy Spirit, and you're going to need it. Because this one thing is incredibly difficult to do. And yet that's what we're called to. It's what we're called to do. So how does a seed produce more fruit? It dies. Growing up, I never planted. We'd always put like 2 or 3 kernels or seeds of corn in the ground, and never once did I grow a plant that only had 2 or 3 kernels on it. Not a single time. It'd have 10 to 15 ears of corn filled with hundreds of kernels, never just 2 or 3. If you want to see the movement of God in your life, it's not a program, it's just love each other, self-sacrificially. How does a branch stay on the vine? There's 2 answers. One is, how does a branch become disconnected from the vine? At what point does God say, I got to trim that thing off? It's at the point where we accept hate as our way of life. It's not at the point where we feel hatred. It's at the point where we accept it. And we say, that's how I'm going to live from now on. And it happens all the time. Sadly, it happens all the time in church, where we accept it. We say, that's just the way it is. So here's the invitation. How will you show love to one another today? I know I say this one quite often, and I always say, I don't need to hear your stories. And I don't. But you need to hear your answer to this question. How will I show the people in this room that I love them? How will I connect with them? How will I let them know? Some of you send out cards. There's a couple of you that send out cards. Just to let people know you're thinking about them, that you care. What are you going to do to show people that you love them? Because a love not expressed doesn't feel a whole lot like love. So that's your invitation. I invite you to love one another. Amen? Amen. Amen.